Welcome back to Masonry Studio. I'm David Abrams, founder and CEO of Masonry. Today I have the pleasure of sitting with my friend, Jonathan Bennett, now the president of AmTrust. Before we dive into any of this, you and I were leaving a meeting recently in Miami, heading back to your hotel. You called your wife and you said, I want to exercise right when I get there. I asked you about that after, and you listed out your priorities. Exercise came very early on, work came at the end. Not judging work ethic, but I want to talk about work at the very end. What is it that drives you to exercise every day?
So I think exercise is part of the day, right? So, and you can't answer that question in a vacuum. You have to answer that question with context. The day is made up of different layers, and you have to accomplish, or I have to accomplish all those different layers in order to be successful every day, or different components. So exercise is definitely something that I need to do every day, but that happens early in the morning, and that dovetails together with my prayers and my Torah learning. Sometimes one comes before the other. It all depends on when the sun is coming up and where I happen to be in the world. But both of them are integral parts of the way that I start my day. Spiritual health, physical health, mental health, those were buzzwords, but they're just my words. Those are fundamental components of how I get started. And so I need to accomplish all of those objectives early in the morning so that I'm set and ready to be able to accomplish all those work objectives later on in the day.
One thing you mentioned was sunrise. I have a 3-year-old son and a 1-year-old daughter. You have a few years of parenting experience.
Just a few.
Ahead of me. Tell me about kids. Any advice you could share with me?
So I'm blessed. I have 6 children, thank God. 3 boys, 3 girls. My oldest is 21. My youngest is 10. I think the best advice, it's back to the basics, and you have to lead by example. Practice what you preach. Kids figure out very quickly what the truth is and what's really going on, and they see through it all. And if you practice what you preach, they'll follow your model. And of course, you need mazel with everything, but at least that's a good place to start.
So, a place to start. You were at Yeshiva University. Both of us went to Yeshiva University.
That's right.
What did you study there that you then went to be an investment banker at American Express?
So that probably won't sound so logical. I was an English major, and the truth is I was very interested in business very early on in my life, and I read a book called The One Up on Wall Street by Peter Lynch, who used to be pretty famous. I don't know how famous he is today, but he used to run what was the largest mutual fund in the country, Fidelity Magellan, and he was the one that actually propagated the buy what you know mentality in the stock market. So he would say, if you like to take a coffee at Dunkin' Donuts, you should probably buy the stock because you know something about it that that other people don't. In the introduction to that book, he railed against studying business in college. I think he must have been a liberal arts major, and he thought that it was really important to study creativity and to understand how creativity works versus studying basic skills like accounting and finance in undergrad. He said that you can always learn that later on, but as a young person, the opportunity to really explore how the creative process works, that's the time to do it. Because before you know it, you're stuck in the rat race and you're stuck, working in a way that will limit potentially, that creative process. And so I took those words to heart. I always loved to read and I loved to write. And I wanted to read everything that Shakespeare wrote. And I knew if I didn't do it then, it would never happen. And that's what I did.
Very cool. So you go from investment banking, skip over to real estate. What happened in between? How did real estate happen?
So there were a lot of things actually that happened in between. There were things that happened before American Express as well. And I did try to do some entrepreneurial stuff earlier on in my career, actually while I was in school. I had taken a semester off before it was actually in vogue, to do things like that, certainly on the East Coast. But the journey, I would say, from Amex to real estate, that part does have a logical progression. I worked at a small investment bank, boutique investment bank, before I worked at American Express, where we raised money for high-tech companies, early-stage high-tech companies in the late 90s. And this was all part of what I call my capital markets experience, cutting my teeth in capital markets, understanding what it means to spend endless hours doing Excel models, discounted cash flow valuations, putting together offering memorandums and investor presentations, and just understanding the language of capital markets. The work that I had done as the investment banker and then at Amex were different kinds of work, but fundamentally they're all the same. And that was part of the transition to real estate as well. I like to say an asset's an asset, cash flow is cash flow. There are nuances in every business, and the language might be a little bit different. But fundamentally, it's like I said, when you understand a financial statement, you understand a financial statement. I moved to real estate really because I had gotten really beaten up after March of 2000 when the tech bubble burst at that time. I got very lucky. It was all through a personal relationship. I ended up with a gig working for American Express and selling off a lot of investments that they had made for their corporate venture capital business. And I was looking around and I saw what was going on in the real estate business. And I always was interested in the real estate business, friends and family in the real estate business. And I felt that that would be a better place to spend my time.
So how did you get into real estate?
Great question. I woke up one morning and I said, I want to be in real estate. And first rule is buy what you know, back to the Peter Lynch model, and location, location, location. I literally got in my car and I started driving around looking for opportunities, and I stumbled across some beachfront property not far from where I live. I was fortunate that I had some relationships in the real estate business, and I was able to put together a deal to purchase this property and develop 150 units there, and then it was off to the races.
And then you started with the Nakash family. You were there for about 10 years.
Yeah, a little bit more than that, yeah.
So you're working in real estate. Did you fall in love with real estate, or it was just the deals? What was it about it that hooked you after you were really in?
So I would say it goes back to that creative process. When you start a technology company, it's extremely creative. It can be an incredible experience, but you can sink a tremendous amount of time, effort, and capital into creating something, and you are very likely left with nothing at the end of the day. Everybody reads the great stories. Everybody hears about the winners. They used to say the model in venture capital is 1 in 10. It's really not 1 in 10. It's probably 1 in 1,000, that really work. The vast majority of these businesses fail, and you've expended a tremendous amount of time, effort, and energy, and like I said, capital to make that happen. Real estate's a different model. Real estate, you have an asset, and no matter what happens, there's going to be that asset at the end of the day. Of course, you have to be careful with leverage, and you have to know how to structure things properly, but there's much less of a chance that you're going to expend all of that time, effort, and energy and capital and be left with zero. And I felt that that would be a much better place for me to spend my time, and I would still be able to use my creativity in all the different facets, from design and construction and leasing and capital formation, buying and selling. And I love the idea that I could travel the country, I could travel the world for that matter, take ideas from all different parts of the world, and then insert them into parts of the world where they have not yet been seen. Yeah, it was just another way to utilize my creativity and hopefully have something that I could be proud of at the end of the day that will be there forever.
You mentioned travel. You bought a building in Santa Monica, I believe, for $60 million and sold it for $100 million.
58 million.
58, I apologize.
Yes, and we sold it for $100 million. Yeah.
$100 million. In how long?
A year and a half.
Year and a half. You've bought in Nashville, you've bought in Vegas, you bought several iconic properties in Miami. I get asked all the time, travel, isn't it exhausting? How do you respond to that?
Yeah, it is exhausting. But I think it's more about the other, I guess it's kind of a cliche, that if you love what you do, it's not work. And so I love traveling. Actually, I do like going on airplanes. That's something I picked up during my time at Nikesh. They're aviation enthusiasts, and I know more than the average person about aviation, about airplanes, having been educated there. So I love the process, and I think, you know, there's the end result of putting in the effort is a major motivating factor. So I love going to new places, and I love learning about new opportunities, and all those places that you referenced, those are all experiences that I take with me in all my future endeavors. And so it's never stop learning, and no pun intended, but right, it's a journey, and you actually have to take the journey.
Take us through a journey of a difficult deal or an exciting deal. So you've worked on some crazy deal structures. What stands out to you?
Wow, I mean, you just referenced one. That's when we had purchased the Apple store on the 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica. And I think that's an easy one to talk about because it's something that we actually sold. So I don't think there's anything that's too sensitive to discuss there. But that was an incredible opportunity where we were able to purchase an asset. Actually, there is, you know, some real interesting facets to this story, because when I bought that, the Wall Street Journal actually wrote a somewhat derogatory blurb about the transaction and said that it was the highest price per square foot ever paid for an asset on the 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica. And to certain people, maybe I looked foolish when I did it. Nobody understood what the capital structure was, and the devil's in the details. And we had borrowed, I would say, about 96 or 97% of the purchase price. We had done a thorough analysis of risk reward, and all investments come down to risk reward. And at the time, Apple did not even have any debt. You know, today they do, but at that time they didn't. And we felt very comfortable that the cash flow was going to be there, was a long-term lease, and that we were going to be able to cover our debt service, and that at the term of the lease, which was 20 years, we were going to be sitting with a great asset at a very low basis, having paid down a big portion of the loan. And we were not actually looking to sell it. So I had very little capital, very little equity in the transaction. And like I said, it had that really unique, high leverage structured debt. And somebody just came knocking on our door one day and said that they wanted to buy the asset. And they did not start at $100 million. They started way south of that. We went through a process pushing them up. And the beautiful thing was, we did not need to transact, which is always the best way to negotiate. And I do like to be transparent as I can be with my counterparties. And I told them, listen, this is the number. And if you hit the number, I'm going to make it happen. And it actually was not a long process. We found out after the fact that the buyer was somebody that had a 1031, so he had a lot of pressure. It was a huge 1031. He wanted to split it up between something that had more stable cash flow and then take part of it and put it into something that was more development oriented. He quickly met our price, and yeah, and we did the deal. We had to pay massive defeasance, but even so, it was a 13x in a year and a half, and a pretty incredible experience.
So one thing you mentioned that was risk reward. Sounds like that could have been the most profitable deal you've worked on, or up there. What is a deal, not necessarily dollar amount, but personally the most rewarding thing you've worked on?
Oh, wow. That's an interesting question. I have to think if there's something that I can specifically target. The truth is, when I do a transaction, I'm married to the transaction. I have had the luxury of not being forced to kind of just manufacture deals and buy things for the sake of buying. Having working in a family office during that period of time, I would actually go back to that original deal that I did where I made very little money, building the apartment buildings on the beach, because just going through that process of learning a lot about the real estate business, learning a lot about the construction business, the design business, building near the water, and all that comes along with that, with government regulators, Army Corps of Engineers, and DEP. So which is an interesting answer, I think. So that was very rewarding, even though, again, I made very little money, because I really felt like I went to school. And I think I would say that deals that don't work out many times, that is the reward, right? You always have to have perspective, and you can be really happy about deals that work out. And I guess the reward is that financial reward. The deals that don't work out, what's the positive spin, right? So the positive spin would be, what did I learn from this? And how do I not do it again? Or just how do I do it better?
AmTrust. How did this happen? Why AmTrust?
So it's actually a pretty interesting story. I wasn't necessarily looking to make a move. I had received a phone call from a childhood friend of mine who's been very successful in business, and he does a lot of investing in technology companies, and he has a family of his own companies, and usually likes to make strategic investments where he could somehow benefit his portfolio, by adding to the portfolio and investing in new companies. He had called me up and he had told me that he had a prop tech investment opportunity, and he wanted to know if I could attend the meeting and help him do the due diligence. I said yes, because of course he's my friend, of course I will go. But the morning of the meeting, it turned out that I had to be in my office in New York City, and I was really struggling with canceling on him last minute, and going to my office, and then ultimately I said I can't do that to him. He's from out of town, and he was here, and so I went to that meeting. And at the meeting, there were a few people sitting around a table, and the prop tech guys were talking, and I was doing the other talking. It was just us, and the other fellows that were sitting around the table were just listening, seemingly not the most well-versed in the real estate business, but they were investors. After the meeting, one of the people who was sitting around the table said to me, can I get your number? Do you mind if I call you? And that was one of the members of the Garfunkel family, who are the owners of AmTrust, and that's kind of how it started. And they recruited me, and we had a more formal process. Went on for about a month, and I decided to make the jump.
It's a big jump. Was there something that stood out to you that resonated? What is it that was that magnet that pulled you to say yes?
I would tell you there's, again, it's contextual and it's nuanced, and there's a variety of reasons why I made the decision. First and foremost, they have a stellar reputation, the people who are behind the company. The family's been in business since the 70s. They've had a variety of successful businesses, from American Stock Transfer to multiple insurance companies and other financial services ventures. I knew multiple people that had worked for them in these different businesses, who were still working for them at this time. And like I said, they had a stellar reputation. So I would say that was step one. Step two is the institutional quality of the operations that they've created. They ran two publicly traded companies, multi-billion-dollar operations. One has since gone private, that's AmTrust, the insurance company. Another one was called National General, which was sold to Allstate for $4 billion earlier in 2021, I believe. So that level of institutional quality appealed to me. And then the opportunity itself, it was definitely a step up for me to become president of AmTrust Realty. We have over 130 people that work in the company. We're vertically integrated as an office owner and operator. And the opportunity to come in, try to fix pieces that might have been broken in the work culture, invest in technology, modernize, and really have the opportunity to grow the platform in a serious and meaningful way. All of that combined really propelled me to move forward.
And so now you're overseeing a 12 million square foot portfolio. I assume that there are some challenges with that. What does that look like? Walk us through learning a 12 million square foot portfolio.
So early on when I first started, and I started just around the Jewish holidays, and so it was tough to find the time to get into these assets and to really try to understand them. The first time I went to Chicago, we have 6 million square feet in Chicago, I toured 6 million square feet in 6 hours. And that was a day trip, leaving there in the morning and coming back to New York that night. I think the process has been just diving into it, and you just keep on probing and reviewing and learning and interviewing and talking to the people at the property level, and trying to continue to read whatever financial statements or data that we have about these properties, meeting with our architects and engineers and designers, and just diving into it. There's no other way. And then the mind absorbs what the mind absorbs. I'm the kind of person, I will reread the book again and again and again and again. Every time, again, you pick up another detail. You see something you didn't see before. And that's the process.
You mentioned the technology, wanting to bring more technology to these buildings. You also mentioned earlier the idea that you fall in love with buildings. Is there any one of these buildings that you want to date before the others, and what type of technology are you referring to change that date?
So let's just qualify the statement first. When I was 15 years old, I was sitting in the lobby of a hotel in Miami Beach, and there were a bunch of wealthy guys that were sitting around having a big business meeting, or at least it appeared that way in my eyes. And I saw somebody pitching another one of the individuals sitting at the table for a real estate deal, and he said a line that I've said many times, and I will never forget. He said, "First let me fall in love with the numbers, then I'll fall in love with the building." And so it's easy to fall in love with the buildings because the buildings in our portfolio are iconic, they're architecturally significant, they're meaningful, but it is a business, and the numbers at the end of the day are what will tell the story. Going to the technology and to talk specifically about the different buildings, it is a shotgun approach. So we are working on modernizing every building in our portfolio. We are doing what has to be done today if you want to be in the office ownership and leasing business, which is becoming more commonplace. People know what I'm about to say, which is you must take the hospitality-like approach to the office. That means that you have to curate experiences. It has to be meaningful, it has to be thoughtful, high design, and really taking the same approach that you would take to designing a hotel now to designing the office building. So that means that, and the high level also concept is this idea of the third place, right? So you need to create lobby spaces that are going to have varied seating and meeting options, and maybe food and beverage options, and maybe there's music or some other type of audio or some other type of entertainment, but it's going to have some sort of high design, and most importantly, I don't want to leave this out, it has to be authentic to that building. We're not building, right now we're not talking about building new buildings, we're talking about improving existing buildings. So you want to know who the architect of that building was, you want to know what that architect meant and what that architect was trying to accomplish, and any improvement that you're going to make, it should be in sync with that delivery. So that's the lobby. You have to have what they call tenant amenities, right? So lounge space, dedicated square footage, so tenants can have space on another floor where there will be all kinds of soft seating and hard seating and conferencing and stadium seating. Maybe there's a bar, maybe there's a coffee bar, and maybe there's happy hour later on in the day. There's indoor space, maybe there's fireplaces and pool tables, and there's outdoor space with maybe some outdoor fire pits, and again, and trees and greenery and things that are thoughtfully designed. Same thing with physical fitness. It's not just a gym. We used to say in the hotel business, we would call these 200 square foot gyms with a treadmill and an elliptical machine and a couple of free weights, we call that a check the box gym. Check the box gyms don't work, right? It has to be welcoming, and it has to be creative, and it has to be figuring out spaces that people want to be in. The third place means different things to different people. So I like to exercise, so that means that whatever the gym offering is going to be, it's got to be good, and it's got to be something that's going to entice me. There are people that do yoga, there are people that spin, there are people that do all kinds of different things that has to be taken into account when you're designing these facilities. Some people don't exercise, so they want to be in that tenant amenity lounge. Maybe they just want to have, a fantastic lobby that's super impactful. But everybody needs that third place, and so if you're going to be in the office business and you don't want to be the low-cost provider, and I guess that's a critical part of the story, that's the kind of business that I want to be in. I want to be in places that tenants are going to use as recruitment tools and as retainment tools, right? So tenants want to bring employees back to the office. Let's give them a reason to want to be in the office. Let's look at it again. You want to go on a journey, you want to come, you're working for my company, you're coming to this fantastic office where we get to collaborate and have a meaningful existence within the office. And I think that speaks very loudly to tenants, and it allows the tenants then to recruit the best people.
Do you ever approach an anchor tenant and say, what amenity do you want? We have this rebrand ongoing now. What do you want? What helps you recruit?
We do that all the time, and we're also very fortunate that we work with some well-known, talented, architects, designers, leasing brokers that help us understand what that is. And it's really all the aforementioned things that I mentioned to you. I would say to kind of answer that question with a little bit of a different angle, we're studying what's working and what's not working. So we go to other buildings and we see what they've done, and we're talking about some incredible work that's been done over the last couple of years. But for example, something that comes to mind is there's a building in Chicago that has this incredible screen. It's like a full-length screen of the lobby. It's a digital screen, but the way they did it, it just doesn't work. And I think there is a different kind of execution that will work. So people talk about, for example, the Salesforce Towers. That works really well when you work into their lobbies and you see how they did it. I happened to tour the condos at the Waldorf Astoria yesterday, and I saw their sales gallery. And by the way, that has nothing to do with office, right? Because that's luxury condos. Wrong, right? So I'm there, and while I'm there, I'm thinking about what are they doing at the Waldorf in the luxury condo space, and what can I pick up there that might be applicable to what I'm doing for my office tenants?
Live, work, play.
Live, work, play.
Right. So you mentioned earlier that you studied English in school because you understood that you'll get the fundamentals of accounting and finance later on. What do you say to a student that's graduating college now that wants to be the next president of AmTrust?
Oh, so I still believe in that. I firmly do. I think that there's nothing wrong. You want to be an accountant, you know, and you love numbers, and maybe you're going to be a math major. There's a lot of creativity there as well. It's really what speaks to you, what moves you, right? So that's just how I was wired, right? And I wanted to be true to myself. Not everybody's wired that way. Not everybody plays a musical instrument. Not everybody plays sports. Not everybody paints. People have all different innate talents, and that's something that spoke to me, so I wanted to be true to myself. And that's really the advice that I would say. I mean, that's the advice that I give my own kids. Do what you love. And if it moves you, and that's what you love, do it. The money will come. Do what you love.
I've asked a lot of questions. Do you have anything in mind? Anything you want to understand?
Am I supposed to ask you a question now?
You can ask a question. You can mention something that I didn't think about saying. This is your space after all.
Well, the only thing I would say is, David, and I don't even know if we've ever spoken about this, and I don't know if you mentioned this on one of the videos that you know, that you put out there, but I know a little bit about your story, and I find your story very inspirational, and I think that these types of productions are really important, so that folks that are stuck out there, that need that inspiration and that need that motivation, they need to hear these stories. They need to understand that it's all possible. You have to have meaning. You have to do what you love, and you got to work hard, and you got to get up early, and you got to figure it out for yourself and your own format. But it's important for people to hear the success stories, and that not every success story is about, you know, some billionaire that took a company public. There are a lot of success stories out there, and everybody has something to contribute, and everybody has something to offer.
You and I executed a deal right at the 11th hour as you were leaving Jordache, and that was in Miami. And the last 2 years, there's been this major flight down to Miami, the Great Migration South. We've seen restaurateurs like Major Food Group come down, not open one, but many locations. You have a substantial portfolio in New York. What are you thinking the landlords of New York have to do, if it's the landlords, to bring tenants from places like Miami, from places like LA to New York?
Great question. I think they need to demonstrate that that the business is here, and that they're going to do well here. I think that the migration to Miami had a lot to do with the fact that they knew that they weren't the only ones that were migrating to Miami. They migrated to Miami to service the needs of all the people that had moved to Miami during COVID, and that had a lot to do with what public policy was in Miami, and the fact that Miami is a warm weather state and people felt a lot more comfortable being outdoors. I think now the message is COVID's over. Mask mandates were lifted in schools in New Jersey and Connecticut today or yesterday. Barron's announced COVID was over for business in its latest edition. And now is the time to start preparing for the inevitable tsunami of activity and demand that we're going to see in all the areas that have seen the least amount of development in the urban centers over the last 2 years.
The least being the B and C's in terms of quality of building?
Not quality of building,
sub-market?
just the fact that the dense urban areas where people were the most fearful of catching COVID, I think have seen the least amount of just general activity. They've seen, I haven't seen the statistic in a while, but for a long time, the statistic of how many restaurants had closed because of COVID was something that was hitting the media and hitting the papers. So many storied restaurants that have been around for decades had closed down because people were scared to go out. We know that's already changed. We know that we have all the outdoor eating that popped up in New York. They changed the rules. They let people create, restaurateurs create outdoor areas. And we know that when the weather was warm during the summer, they did very well. I think that's going to happen again, and I think we're starting to see all the activity pick up already. If you walk around this neighborhood during lunchtime today, you'll see a lot of full restaurants. Goldman Sachs opened their offices, I think today. They required everybody to come back February 8th. A lot of the city agencies who are down here in the financial district are requiring employees to come back to the office. So now's the time. If you want to get a good deal, this is the time to get a good deal. 2 years from now, it'll be too late.
So it's a good time. I want to go back and finish on this thought to something that you said earlier, mazal. It's possible that some of our audience doesn't understand what that means. What does that word mean to you? Translate, please.
So most people think mazal is luck. I think mazal actually is fate. We make our own fate, right? So we have to create that fate. Sometimes things go our way, but I guess people talk about that, right? You create your own luck, you create your own opportunity. I'm forgetting how the saying goes, but you know, something like I'm an overnight success, 20 years in the making, right? You know, you got to just keep plugging away, and good things will happen.
Thank you for doing this.
Pleasure.
This is great.
Okay.